All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Fabi Paolini. Fabi, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Kevin.
Well, I'll tell you, after our last conversation, I have really been looking forward to this. And I just want to start by giving a shout out to George because George Rivera is the one that introduced you and I. And I'll tell you, I don't know what your experience with George has been, but I love George. and,
Me too.
and George is just one of those guys. He's a family guy. He's a guy who's had immense success in business. And him and his son. Well, I don't know I know dad helps with the podcast, but his son Leo hosts this podcast where he interviews all these successful entrepreneurs. I think they've done about 100 interviews now and
It's pretty
stuff.
crazy. I was
And
there. His son is like 11, I think.
yeah,
So, I mean,
yeah,
I have a 10-year-old and I'm like, this kid is interviewing me. And she was like, what? How is that possible?
I
So,
know,
pretty
right?
amazing. Yeah, pretty incredible.
And so when you get introduced to from somebody like that you already have this great relationship with, it just carries so much weight. And of course, when George and introduced you and I, and he sent that email for us, I'm just like, wow. Well, anybody that George is saying, Kevin, you should have a conversation with, I'm in. You know.
Yeah, me
And
too.
and what a testament right there to the power of right relationships, which of course is what this podcast is all about. And so, George, if you happen to be watching this, thank you, man. Just really love you and really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah. So Fabi, I guess I'll start with a really simple question, just kick things off and get us going, and then we can dig in deeper. I want to start off with by asking, what do you do and who do you serve?
Simple question. Well, basically, what I do, Kevin, is I work with experts who are really exceptional at what they do. And so
Okay.
most of these are coaches, they're consultants, they're lawyers, higher end service providers. And so these are people who are exceptional in what they do. And what I help do is make them become impossible to overlook. Essentially, a lot of these people have messaging that is very generic or simplified. They're getting their clients incredible results. They have the credentials, they have this incredible backstory of all the things that they've done. And yet, the way that they express what they do sounds like live your best life. I'm going to help you reach your potential. It doesn't fully capture the fullness of who they are. And so, the market is changing. Lots of things are happening with AI and with competition. And they feel like, in a way, they're slowly getting left behind. So, what I do is really help capture, and we'll get into all of this later, but I help really capture what I call their angle of mastery to really make them feel like they're category leaders, like they're on their own, and they are owning the conversation in the space that they're in. So, that's the summary, basically.
I love it. So this is really interesting. I'm curious. So do you think that the reason these entrepreneurs don't like really communicate effectively, do you think it's because they don't know how, or do you think it's maybe they're embarrassed to, or maybe they think it's going to come off as bragging, or maybe a combination of both, or is it maybe even something else altogether?
I think it's a lot of different things, right? I think that oftentimes there's lots of different layers, right? On one end, there are people who have built their businesses off of referrals. And so when you built your business off of referrals, you do sales for this person and operations for that person and marketing for this person and then team for, and so you're adapting to the client. And because of that, communicating that is very difficult because you're like, I don't exactly know what I do, but I know that I'm great at it. And then we have cases where what they do is very complex. There's a lot of depth to the work. And
Okay.
so translating that feels just very difficult. How do I explain sometimes decades of experience, of frameworks, of methods, of processes? How do I convey that in a way that is clear? So there's lots of different reasons why. Sometimes they're oversimplifying it. They're like, let me just keep it simple, but then it doesn't capture the fullness of it. So in reality, for me, it's about them not necessarily having the skill. And you don't need to have the skill. I mean, you've built, skills in other areas of your business. It doesn't have to be this one, but they're at a point where they recognize that having this skill or having somebody come in and help them develop it is what they need to be able to grow or get to the next phase of their business, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you even get into doing this kind of work, Fabi?
Okay, so I'll try to summarize it as much as possible.
Okay.
I went to I studied advertising and marketing back a long time ago, about 20 years ago. I got out of college and I went back to Venezuela. So I went to college here in the U.S., went back to Venezuela, where I'm originally from, and started working in advertising in Leo Burnett, which is one of the big ad agencies.
Mhm.
But very quickly, I ended up quitting and starting my own business, focusing primarily on branding. Back then, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, he was a singer, and a lot of the clients that I had were in the music industry in Venezuela, across different countries as well. So I worked a lot with artists in the beginning.
Okay.
A few years into that, I decided to do an MBA with a specialization in branding because I felt like I wanted to go deep. I always had this thing, even when I was working with my husband in terms of his music career. I always try to find like what is it that you stand for? What is the message? Even as a singer, what is it that you believe in and really developing that. So I had that hunch that that was really important. So I did that and expanded from working with artists to basically every type of business. This is back like maybe 2010, right?
Okay.
2015, we come to the US and not planned, we ended up deciding to stay here. I always clarify that I did this legally, just in case, okay? All legally. Anyways, so we decided to stay here in the US and I started my business here 2016, focus on branding, design, some of the messaging pieces. As I was doing that, and as I was investing in my own business to find clients, because back in Venezuela everything was word of mouth, but it wasn't as effective in the U.S. Let's say it like that. Bringing those clients over here, especially with the currency exchange. And so I started kind of investing in marketing and doing all the different things, and recognizing that having a beautiful website and a beautiful design and all these things, it doesn't serve anything if the message isn't highly clear, right? Hyper clear. And so as I went on to my journey of building my own business and bringing in clients and all these different things, I went in deeper into research, into, studying as much as possible, analyzing what the market was responding to, and recognizing the importance of messaging and how to really effectively communicate what makes you different and how to speak to buyers. And we'll talk a little bit more like some of the things that came up in a
Okay.
moment. But for me, it was really about really recognizing the importance of having a message that is very compelling and very clear and that speaks to people who are actually ready to buy versus those that just have problems.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've been focused on basically for the last 10 years.
Okay. Okay. I love hearing the backstory because yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight, you know.
No,
It is a
even though we
process.
wanted to, but no.
Yes, yeah. And that's the thing with everybody, anybody who has deep expertise, it's because it's taken them years to get there. They put a lot of time and effort into just being able to have that expertise.
Exactly.
What
Absolutely.
inspires you most about the work that you get to do and the impact that you get to make, Fabi?
So for me, honestly, we've had clients who have had incredible results and lots of growth and higher conversions and all the like, I've been doing this for 10 years. We've had over 860 clients that we've served across multiple industries and niche and all the different things. But to me, it's about helping people really be able to step into their true genius, right? Because it's super interesting how people oftentimes, when they're developing their message, and it's often a lot of times people do it very naturally, either instinctively they're building it out as they go and trying to figure it out and kind of like, oh, I'm going to go with this or I'm going to go with that. Other times they're hiring agencies to help them develop their messaging. But oftentimes, what I find is that there's not enough depth, right, in the process. And so, what lights me up is being able to go really deep, to really excavate the full of who you are, right? The fullness of who you are and your genius and all of these different areas that make you different. Oftentimes people will focus on one thing thinking that that's the logical, like credible professional way to go in your business. And then there's this other part of you of maybe how you grew up or your belief system or your values or how you are with your family or something that you do personally that maybe has nothing to do with your business, but it is the core of how you operate. Even I would say like what people do instinctively, right? Sometimes people do things instinctively and they're just great at it, but they're like, how do I, this is impossible for me to explain because I just do it because I know. Okay, so for me, being able to pull that out of them and actually give it a name and give it a structure and give it a framework and give it a message and then having my clients see that and be like, oh, finally somebody has
That's
captured who
it.
I am. That like beyond like, sure, we've hit whatever. I had a client, for example, who was hit up at a stuck, quote unquote, stuck at about 70K per month in her business. We helped her reach consistent at over 125K. And we've had incredible results, right? Conversion numbers, all the things. And those things are great, but that's not what I like. That's not my outcome. My ultimate outcome is helping people really feel like this is the message that represents me. And all of this expertise and these years of work and effort and clients and pattern recognition, all of that are finally put into a place and into a message that feels like it's truth and like it's me.
Yeah.
So you can see that I get excited just talking about it. So
Yes,
yeah,
there is no hiding your passion for what you do, Fabi. So
exactly.
I love it. I love it. Well, so because I've experienced this, that when I was not clear on my communication and versus becoming clear and being able to communicate effectively what I do and the value that I provide, and having that just be totally in alignment with who I am and how I want to show up and stuff. Now all of a sudden, people just then get it. The right people get it. And they're like, yes, I want that.
Exactly.
And so, what are some? Because you've alluded to some results here, but what's a result that you have helped a client get? And you don't have to name names. You can if you want. That's totally your call. But what's a result you've helped a client get that you're just incredibly proud of, Fabi?
Well, I have one reason. I mean, because we've worked with so many people, like I said, we've had over 860 clients. There's lots of stories at all the different types of levels and all the different things. So I'll try to come up with a couple that I can give you here that
Sure.
are helpful. So one of my clients, for example, is a coach that's focused on diabetes reversal, right? And so she had a funnel so a marketing strategy, a funnel that she had been investing in for, I think about 6, 7 years,
Okay.
and not really getting the results that she was getting in the beginning anymore. So one of the things that happens very often to my clients is precisely that. They were getting great results with marketing, but the market has shifted a lot with AI, with competition, with the amount of content and noise out there. If you don't have a message that genuinely sounds different, not just ChatGPT, write something that sounds different. No, but there's a structure and a strategy and a system behind it. It's very hard for you to stand out. So when she came to me, the message was just really vague and very
Okay.
kind of generic. I'm going to help you overcome diabetes. And so we went really deep. There's three core things that I do with my clients, Kevin. The first thing is we help them really understand who their power buyers are. So for me, a power buyer is somebody who is ready to invest. They're not just somebody who has a problem, but somebody who's actively looking to solve the problem. So for Taylor, this client, the first thing that we did is we looked at her message from the lens of the buyer. Well, how does the buyer experience? I mean, just because somebody has diabetes, it doesn't mean that they're going to spend $7,000, $8,000 to try to solve it, right? And so we look at first, well, who is your buyer? How do they communicate? How are they experiencing the problem? What are they doing? So that's the first thing that we did with her. The second thing that we do is what I like to call your angle of mastery.
Okay.
And so for me, your angle of mastery is your premise. What is it that you believe in? What is your hypothesis? What is your angle? What is your approach to the problem that is completely different from everybody else's, right? So we did that for Taylor. Typically, what I like to do is come up with concepts that are ownable and that are yours, and they're showing your intellectual leadership, right? Like this is nobody else in the world talks about this. This is the only person that is bringing this perspective, that is talking about the problem in this specific way. So we did that for Taylor. And the third thing that we do is what I like to call the need to have. Oftentimes what happens with people is that they express what they do in a way that it sounds like a nice to have. Sure, it would
Okay.
be nice to solve this problem. It would be nice to have it fixed. Do I need it? Maybe, maybe not. So what I do is look at communication. How do we express what you do in a way so that it feels like a need to have? Not from a place of like, come save me, I need you, but from a place of like, ooh, I need that, right? So we looked at all of these things for Taylor, and she had an incredible jump in her conversions, right? Like, and for her, it was almost the same funnel, right? We replaced a lot of the messaging. I mean, that's obviously the work that we do. But the people that were coming on calls with her were completely different. She was like, I don't even understand this. How are people basically with a credit card on the call, zero objections, ready to enroll, and coming into her program and experience like this incredible growth? So that is one example. Another example that I have is from my client Gary, who is a lawyer, but he also coaches lawyers, right? So he has a program where he's helping lawyers kind of organize their lives and their law firm so that they have a life,
Okay.
basically, right? And so, again, his case was very similar. Message was very, I call it Ursula. Ursula to me means that you're Ursula from The Little Mermaid speaking to the poor, unfortunate souls.
Okay.
And so you're speaking to people that are broken and broke, and the problem is they're so stressed. So his message was like that. And what
Uh-huh.
happens is that when you speak to people like that, that's exactly who you attract. You're attracting people who are broke and are not ready to invest. So we shifted his message, really allowed him to communicate in a way that was much more effective. When he came to me, his business was entirely outbound. So he was very active on LinkedIn, but doing a lot of outbound work. So he had
Okay.
to reach out to lawyers and start conversations. By the end of us working together, it had completely flipped. He doesn't even have time for outbound because he's grown his audience and his clients so much that he doesn't even have time for that. But it's all inbound. And when we started working together, he was working with 5 clients. As as part of his program or whatever. By the end of it, he had 15, and he had maybe like I don't know, like one of the videos that or the interviews that I had with him, he shared that he expected his ROI to be over 50% or 50 times off of what he invested initially into the program. So a
Wow.
lot of growth. So those are just
Yeah.
2 examples, but I have
That's
a lot.
fantastic. Yeah. Well, and what I appreciate about that is, not just sharing the examples, but a little bit of insight into how you do what you do for your clients, which is really
Exactly.
helpful too. So, well, okay. So now that we've got some context set here and people have a little bit of an understanding about who you are and what you're all about, I want to switch gears just a little bit and I want to start talking about the relationship side of this. And so, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Fabi, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
I love it. I love it. Such a good question. So I have 2 people that I want to share.
Okay.
And I'm going to start. The first one is a little bit more business, and the second one is a little bit more personal,
Okay.
right? So the first person I would say is Deb Cobb. So Deb, basically, just to kind of tell you a little bit of the backstory,
Yeah.
is somebody that I met at around, I feel like it was maybe end of 2017. And Deb is a sales coach essentially, like sales. I mean, I'm not going to say salesperson. She's much more than that, right? When we kind of met, there was this instant connection between the two of us. And she came as part of my team in 2018 and we started working together. Originally, she was doing my sales or enrollment calls with potential clients and leads. And slowly that turned into her basically handling our sales team and really helping me with all of that.
Okay.
But the reason why she has made such a big impact in my business is that there's a lot of alignment in the way that we both approach sales, right? I am anti pressure, anti manipulation, anti bro marketing. Let's get you in. I have blah, 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 all of that stuff, right?
Yep.
And Deb is very much like that too. And so with Deb, we were able to build a system in my business that allows me to serve people in our sales process in a way that is really, really authentic. And the way that Deb approaches sales, and she's kind of installed this kind of almost I was gonna say software, but it's not literally a software. It's more like, you know what I mean? It's more like the operating system, let's say it like that, into my business around approaching sales from a place of abundance, a place of integrity, and just a place of absolute authenticity and respect, right? So the way that we approach sales, and this is something that I really learned from her, is about the greatest good for everybody. If it's a fit, wonderful. If it's not a fit, we will never try to try to convince you to enroll into our programs or anything like that. So her way of just approaching sales from such a place of abundance and making sure that I'm always in line, because obviously as a being a human being, there are moments in my business over the last 10 years where I've been like, we need to pressure more, or we need, and she has always kept me in line with the reminder of no, the way to grow is by doing things in a completely different way. You can get extraordinary results in by doing things in a very different way,
Yeah.
which is something that I really appreciate, and it's something that nobody talks about. I feel like everybody that I see online and that does sales, they tend to approach it from a very like conversion number transactional, and that it's logical, right? But her approach to sales is more about how do we serve people? Like that is the conversion. That is the number that we're looking for. True serve, coming from a place of what's the word servitude? I don't feel like that's a word, but
That's a
just
good word.
yeah. Okay. So that's that. And so what happened is that she was able to insert that into the way that we operate
Yeah.
and the way that we do things. And it just makes a massive difference in, first of all, me sleeping better at night. Absolutely. Because I can trust that I'm always coming from a place of integrity and values. And,
Yeah.
just yesterday, just to give you an example, just yesterday, I had somebody reach out to me who wanted to enroll into one of my programs, but she mentioned that she was having a complicated situation, and I turned her down, and I said, this, I don't think that you should enroll. Even if you have the money to enroll, it sounds like you should take care of this situation first. And so that's how I approach sales in a lot of things. And I really feel like thanks to her and just how much of that abundance mindset she has allowed to incorporate into my own business.
Yeah. And man, you are absolutely 100% speaking to the choir on this because I am so in alignment with you in how I view sales. And that that we've all had that experience with that bad car salesperson.
Yeah.
And there's this guy online now. His name's Tommy. People hire him and pay him $1,000 to negotiate the car purchase for them so that they just don't have to go and talk with the dealership. And the guy is just doing his business is growing like crazy. And he
But
does it for people all across the country because people don't want to have that experience.
mm-mm.
And
Who does?
and just being able to communicate effectively and for just show up the way that you're talking about here and the goal is not to make a sale. The
Mhm.
goal is to have a conversation, find out is it a right fit so that they can make a decision. Is this in alignment and stuff? And if it's not, that is totally cool too. That is totally fine, you know.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. There's always space for somebody else, and there's more than enough people that need what you do. And
that's
it's
right.
why, for example, I've never cared at all about competition. It doesn't affect me. Like, there's enough for all of us. So
Yes.
that's how I approach it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned there's one more person you want on. I want to
Yes.
make sure we give you the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. So the second person is my husband.
Okay.
And I'll give you a very quick backstory because I think that this is interesting and relevant in a way. So I had a very interesting childhood. My dad worked in a company where they moved us around everywhere. So I lived in Brazil, I lived in Spain, I lived in the US, I lived in India, I lived in Venezuela. So I lived all over the world, and well, not every continent, but all over the world, right? And when I was about 14 years old, we moved back to Venezuela, right? And that's where my family is originally from. That's where I'm from. And I always studied at American schools because obviously, when you're moving around so many places, you have to keep within the same system. But at the time, when I was around 14, my parents decided to move me into a Venezuelan school because the original plan is that I was going to go to college in a Venezuelan university,
Okay.
which by the way got completely derailed because the government, whatever, politics ended up changing everything, right? Chavez came in, the country fell apart, and so my parents were like, no, let's send her to college to the US.
Ah,
So the reason why I moved to this school was in theory because I was going to study university in Venezuela, which ended up not happening. But on the first day of school and the new school is when I met my husband, who says, by the way, that the moment he saw me at 14 years old, he was like, I'm going to marry her, which is pretty
wow.
wild, right?
Wow.
So my husband and I have been together since, not since we met, but for the last 25 years, essentially.
Okay.
And obviously, beyond the impact that he has made in my personal life in terms of our kids, our family, and all of the life that we've built together, which obviously is something that I can't even put a value on. It's invaluable in many, many ways. But I'll tell you in regards of my business, the impact that he has made. So he's my silent, like behind the scenes secret. It is the best kept secret, right? He's
Uh-huh.
working in our business as well. And a lot of the things that happen in terms of our operations are done by him. But for me, the biggest impact that he has made in my own life in terms of my business is just having absolute certainty around my own value and my own worth, let's say it like that, or just believing in myself even the moments when I have doubted. So he's really good at centering me and grounding me, and just like when my brain goes insane, because again, human being over here, when my brain goes crazy and I stress out or whatever, he can immediately pull me back in and be like, no, this is the truth. And so having somebody like that in your corner that you can trust 100%
Yeah.
is is I think that the most important relationship that you can have in your life, if you have somebody like that that can kind of just ground you again and knows you obviously so well. In my case, obviously, I mean, since we were children, right? But I think that that is the other relationship that has made the biggest impact in my life and in my business as well.
Wow. Wow. So, what's an example of a situation where you personally, Fabi, got to make this really substantial impact? And maybe in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit. You were like, wow, look at what happened right there. And yet you also know that would have never been possible if not for either one, the relationship you have with either one of the people that you just mentioned and stuff. What's an example of something like that where you were empowered in that way?
Well, I mean, more than, a specific example between Deb and my husband Ed, I think that for me, it's what I have found is just the importance of building relationships and really getting to know human beings, right? And so part of what I've experienced is I spent the last 10 years building my business through digital marketing, running ads and creating content and having hundreds or thousands of conversations with leads, with clients, etc. But been in the last year and a half where I have been really, really focused on having more conversations and more relationships with people and getting to know others and really understanding how can I serve you, Kevin, even if it does nothing for me personally, but it's more about connecting people. And so that to me is what I am really lit up by right now. Like, how do I connect people to each other? I think that you can see there's this theme through our conversation of how much I thrive on serving and delivering value and coming from a place of a lot of integrity, right? And so for me, being able to connect people to each other and spark relationships and spark conversations, that to me is something that is really impactful. Obviously beyond the impact that both Deb and Ed have had in my own life in many ways. And there's little tiny little story with both of them. But, I think that the biggest thing for me has been just really becoming a connector of people right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, for anybody listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really love Fabi. I love who she is. I love how she shows up. I love her energy. And maybe they can really relate to some of the things that you've been sharing, and like they're thinking, man, you know what, I bet she could really help me, or I think she could really help our company, or you know what, I have a friend of mine that I think she could really help. Any website, any resources we can share with folks?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go there's a couple places to go. You can go
Okay.
to readytoinvestclients.com,
Okay.
and that's going to take you to a 20-minute video where I really explain a lot of these frameworks and how do you turn what you do into a message that speaks to those power buyers, to the type of people who are ready to invest right now. So it's 20 minutes, but it is extremely powerful and insightful, and it's going to show you a very different perspective. The other way to get in touch with me is to go to brandmessagesession.com.
Okay.
And there you can book a free 15-minute call with me. And this is a diagnostic call where I will personally take a look at your message. And I will say, hey, Kevin, you see this part over here? You are inadvertently speaking to people who are not ready to invest. Here's why. Here's who your buyer is. Here's how they communicate. Here's what your angle of mastery I feel should be. So it's a very much a diagnostic call, and it's not a sales call. I don't pitch on the call. I don't sell anything on the call, but it is a value-based call where I'm going really deep to understand you, your message, and how you can communicate more effectively. That's
Okay.
brandmessagesession.com. And then
Okay.
you can find me everywhere at Fabi Paolini.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap, Fabi?
Well, I think that, kind of adding to what I was saying before, just how important and impactful building those relationships are. And
Yeah.
it's something that I'm not going to say I regret, but I wish I would have focused on from the very beginning in my business, right? I spent 10 or 8 years doing marketing, like digital marketing and content and all of that, and not really giving the energy and space and time that I needed to build relationships and really network, and more than network, again, becoming a connector. And I think that this is such an important thing to focus on, and it's going to make a massive difference in your business. I've seen it already in mine in a short period of time. So that's what I would say. Really, really just putting your heart and energy into that. But I would add that to do that effectively, your message needs to be on point so that people can remember you and know, oh, I need to connect you to Fabi, who is the person that does this. So that's why the messaging is also important too.
Awesome. Well, Fabi, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
You bet.